Commander Sarah Vance opened her eyes and found herself in darkness. Her wrists bound by cold metal chains that bit into her skin like hungry teeth. And for a moment she could not remember where she was or how she had gotten there. But then the memories came flooding back like a wave crashing against the shore of her mind. Her ship, the United Earth Coalition vessel Perseverance, had been traveling through neutral space on a routine patrol mission when the attack came without warning. And she remembered the alarms screaming through the corridors and the hull shaking as enemy weapons tore through the metal like paper. And she remembered giving the order to abandon ship before everything went black. Now she was here, wherever here was, and she could hear strange clicking sounds echoing through the darkness around her, sounds that did not belong to any language she had ever heard before. The lights came on suddenly, blinding her for a moment, and when her eyes adjusted, she saw them for the first time. The creatures that had captured her and destroyed her ship and killed so many of her crew. They were tall, standing at least 8 feet high, with bodies covered in black exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian under the harsh lights. And their faces were alien and terrifying, with multiple eyes that glittered like red gemstones and mandibles that clicked together when they spoke. These were the Valori, though Sarah did not know their name yet, and they looked at her the way a person might look at an insect, with a mixture of curiosity and disgust and complete indifference to her suffering. One of the creatures approached her and grabbed her chin with a clawed hand, turning her face from side to side as if examining a piece of meat at a market. And it made clicking sounds to its companions that she could not understand. "What is this thing?" the creature seemed to be asking, and another one consulted a device in its hand and made more clicking sounds in response. They did not know what she was, Sarah realized, and they had never seen a human before, and to them she was just another strange alien from some unknown corner of the galaxy, soft and weak and utterly insignificant. They dragged her through corridors made of dark metal and strange organic material, and she saw other prisoners along the way, aliens of dozens of different species, all of them chained and defeated and waiting for whatever fate awaited them. Finally, they brought her to a processing center where Valori officials sat behind desks made of bone, and they scanned her body with devices that beeped and hummed and recorded data about her biology. "Unknown bipedal mammalian," one of them announced in a bored voice. And Sarah had learned enough of their clicking language by now to understand the basic words. No natural armor, no claws, no venom glands, no apparent defensive capabilities. Another official made a sound that might have been laughter, a harsh clicking noise that grated on her ears like metal scraping against stone. "Combat rating?" the first one asked. "Disposable fodder, Class 7, the second one replied. "She will not survive her first match in the arena." The arena, Sarah thought, and she understood now what kind of place she had been brought to. A world where prisoners fought and died for the entertainment of their captors. A Colosseum of blood and death where the weak were fed to the strong. They fitted a shock collar around her neck, a device that would deliver agonizing pain if she tried to escape or disobey. And the warden who attached it leaned close to her face with his mandibles clicking in amusement. "You will last 1 round, soft thing," he said. "2 if the crowd wants entertainment before you die." Sarah said nothing in response. But inside her mind she was already working, already calculating, already planning her survival with the cold precision that humans had developed over millions of years of evolution. She observed everything around her as they led her to her cell, counting the guards and noting their patrol patterns, mapping the corridors and memorizing the layout of the facility, identifying the 14 different alien species imprisoned alongside her, and assessing which ones might be useful allies. Her cell was small and dark and smelled of fear and death, and she shared it with 3 other prisoners who looked at her with eyes full of hopelessness and despair. "Another one for the meat grinder," one of them whispered. a small creature with gray skin and too many arms. They send the weak ones in first to warm up the crowd. Syrah sat in the corner of the cell and flexed her hands, feeling the strength in her muscles and the determination in her heart. And she controlled her breathing the way she'd been trained to do in the military academies of Earth. The Valori did not know what they had captured, she thought. They did not know about Earth or humanity, or the long and bloody history that had shaped her species into what it was today. They did not know about the wars that humans had fought against each other for thousands of years, the endless conflicts that had taught them every trick of survival and every method of killing that existed. They did not know about the predators that humans had hunted to extinction, and the environments they had conquered, and the impossible odds they had overcome again and again throughout their history. They did not know that humans were persistent predators, built to chase their prey for hours and days until it collapsed from exhaustion, built to endure pain and injury and keep fighting long after other species would have given up and died. They looked at her soft skin and her lack of claws and her small teeth, and they saw weakness. But they did not understand that the most dangerous predator is not always the one with the biggest fangs or the sharpest claws. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that never stops, the one that keeps coming no matter what, the one that learns and adapts and overcomes every obstacle in its path. Syrah closed her eyes and let herself rest, conserving her energy for the battles ahead. And in the darkness of her cell, she made a silent promise to herself and to the crew members who had died when her ship was destroyed. She would survive this place. She would fight and win and find a way to escape. And she would make the Valori regret the day they had ever crossed paths with a human being. They had sentenced her to die in their Colosseum, but they had made a terrible mistake because they did not know what she was. And by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late. The ghost of HFY was about to be born, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The day of her first fight arrived with the sound of drums echoing through the prison corridors, a deep booming rhythm that made the walls tremble and the prisoners shake with fear. And Syrah stood in her cell listening to that sound and preparing herself for what was to come. Guards came for her with shock prods and chains, and they dragged her through dark tunnels that led beneath the great Colosseum of HFY. And she could hear the roar of the crowd above her like thunder rolling across an endless sky. 100,000 Valori spectators had gathered to watch the day's entertainment, to see prisoners fight and bleed and die on the golden sand of the arena floor. And among all those spectators, not a single one expected the soft-skinned alien to survive. They pushed her through a gate, and she stumbled onto the sand, blinking. In the bright sunlight that poured down from the open roof above, and the crowd made sounds of amusement when they saw her standing there, looking so small and weak and helpless. Across the arena, another gate opened, and her opponent emerged. And when Syrah saw what she was meant to fight, her heart beat faster. But her face remained calm and expressionless. It was a Krethel, a massive reptilian predator with 6 limbs ending in claws like curved daggers. And its body was covered in armored scales that gleamed like bronze in the sunlight, and its mouth was filled with serrated fangs designed for tearing flesh from bone. The creature was 3 times her size and built for killing. And when it saw her standing on the sand, it made a sound like grinding rocks, a sound of hunger and anticipation. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, explaining to the crowd that this would be a quick execution, a small appetizer before the main events of the day. And the spectators clicked their mandibles in approval. The horn sounded, and the Krethel charged, its 6 legs propelling it across the sand with terrifying speed, its claws extended and its jaws wide open. Any other prey would have frozen in that moment, paralyzed by fear as death came rushing toward them. But Syrah was not like any other prey the Krethel had ever hunted. She moved, not backward, not to the side, but forward, directly into the path of the charging predator, and the crowd gasped, in shock at this suicidal action. At the last possible moment, she dropped low and rolled beneath the slashing claws, feeling the wind of the attack pass inches above her head, and she came up behind the creature before it could stop its charge. The Krethel spun around with surprising speed, but Sarah had already analyzed its body and identified the weak points that every creature has, no matter how armored or dangerous it might appear. There, beneath the jaw where the scales were thinner, and there at the joints where the armor plates met, and there at the tendons that controlled the movement of those deadly limbs. She struck with precision and speed, using techniques that humans had developed over centuries of martial arts and military combat training, and her hands found the vulnerable points with deadly accuracy. The Krethel roared in pain and confusion, unable to understand how this tiny, soft creature was hurting it so badly, and it thrashed wildly trying to catch her with its claws. But Sarah was always one step ahead, moving around the creature like water flowing around a stone, striking and retreating and striking again. 11 seconds after the fight began, the Krethel collapsed onto the sand, twitching and whimpering, and Sarah stood over its body, breathing steadily while sweat dripped down her face. The Colosseum fell completely silent, 100,000 Valori spectators staring in disbelief at what they had just witnessed, their mandibles frozen in shock. This was impossible, they thought. This could not have happened. The soft little alien must have cheated somehow. The arena masters consulted with each other in frantic clicking voices, and then they made an announcement. That sent a wave of excitement through the crowd. 2 more opponents would be sent in. They declared to test whether the unknown alien's victory had been luck or something more. The gates opened and 2 creatures emerged. Predators from different worlds with different weapons and different methods of killing, and they both focused their attention on the small human standing alone on the blood-stained sand. Sarah watched them approach, and she felt no fear. Only the calm focus that came from years of training and the survival instincts that were written into her very DNA. The 2 predators attacked together, coordinating their assault in a way that should have overwhelmed any single opponent. But Sarah had been trained to fight multiple enemies at once. She used their size against them, staying between them so they could not attack without risking hitting each other, and she waited for the openings that always came when predators grew frustrated and impatient. The fight lasted longer this time, nearly 2 minutes of brutal combat that left all 3 fighters bleeding and exhausted. But when it was over, Sarah was still standing, and both of her opponents were not. Still, the arena masters were not satisfied, and they sent in 3 more opponents at once, a trio of killers that should have been able to tear any single creature to pieces. But Sarah was not any single creature. She was human, and humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting against odds that should have been impossible to overcome. She fought with a brutality and creativity that confused her captors, using sand as a weapon to blind her enemies and using the bodies of fallen opponents as shields and obstacles. She adapted mid-fight in ways that should have been impossible, learning her enemies' techniques after seeing them once and developing counters that neutralized their advantages. By the time the sun began to set over the Colosseum, Sarah had won 5 matches in a single day, something that had never happened before in the long and bloody history of Kethvar. The crowd did not know whether to cheer or scream in horror, and the arena masters did not know what to do with this strange creature that refused to die according to their expectations. In the prisoner cells that night, whispers spread like fire through dry grass, whispers about the soft-skinned alien who had done the impossible, and they gave her a name that would echo through the ages. They called her the Ghost, because she moved through battle like a spirit that could not be touched or stopped or killed, and because she showed no emotion no matter what horrors she faced. The Ghost of Kethvora had claimed her first victories, and in the halls of power, The Valori leaders began to wonder what exactly they had captured. What kind of creature could do the things she had done? But they did not know the answer yet, and by the time they discovered the truth about humanity, it would already be too late. Weeks passed in the Colosseum of Kethvara, and with each passing day, the legend of the ghost grew stronger and spread further across the Valori dominion, carried by whispers and rumors and the terrified testimonies of those who had witnessed her fights. Sarah Vance had become something more than a prisoner now. She had become a phenomenon that the Valori could not explain or understand or control, and that made her dangerous in ways that went far beyond her combat abilities. Every match they sent her into ended the same way, with her opponents lying broken on the sand and the ghost standing over them with blood on her hands, but no expression on her face. And the crowds who came to watch her fight could not decide if they were witnessing a hero or a monster. She never roared or beat her chest or displayed dominance the way other arena champions did. She never showed pain even when she was wounded. She never begged or pleaded or showed any weakness at all. She simply endured, and then she won. And then she walked back to her cell and waited for the next fight with the patience of a predator who knows that time is always on its side. The prisoners who shared the dark cells beneath the arena began to look at her differently as the weeks went by, with something like hope in their eyes instead of despair, and they whispered among themselves about the impossible things they had seen her do. Some of them had been in the Colosseum for years, had seen countless champions rise and fall, had watched the best fighters from 100 different worlds eventually meet their end on the bloody sand. But they had never seen anything like the ghost. High above the arena, in the gleaming towers where the rulers of the Valori Dominion made their decisions, worried discussions were taking place about what to do with the unknown alien who was disrupting the natural order of things. Arena champions were useful political tools, symbols that could be used to demonstrate the power and glory of the Dominion. But this was different. This was a creature who should have been classified as disposable fodder, defeating warriors who had been bred for combat. The High Council decided to send an investigator to discover the truth about the ghost, and they chose High Inquisitor Kethral for this important task. A brilliant scientist and interrogator who had never failed to uncover the secrets of any subject. Kethral arrived at the Colosseum with his team of researchers and immediately began his investigation, starting with interviews of those who had survived their encounters with the ghost. What he heard from these survivors disturbed him more than anything he had encountered in his long career. "She does not tire," one of them told him. "A massive warrior from a species bred for endurance. I fought her for 20 minutes and my muscles burned with exhaustion. But her breathing never changed and her movements never slowed. I broke her arm during our match," another survivor reported, still trembling at the memory. "I heard the bone snap and I thought I had won. But she kept fighting as if nothing had happened. And I watched her set the bone herself while we were still in combat. She learns faster than any creature I have ever seen," a third survivor whispered, his many eyes wide with fear. "Every technique I used against her, she countered by the second attempt, as if she could read my mind and know what I was going to do before I did it." Kethral recorded all of these testimonies and then turned his attention to the medical scans that had been taken when the ghost was first processed. And what he found in those scans made his mandibles click with confusion and growing concern. Her species was built for endurance in ways that seemed almost impossible, with a cardiovascular system designed to sustain activity for hours or even days without rest, and muscles that recovered from fatigue at an incredible rate. Her bones were dense and strong, but more importantly, they healed. They actually repaired themselves after being broken, something that many species could not do at all. Her immune system was a marvel of biological engineering, capable of adapting to foreign pathogens and fighting off infections that would have killed members of other species within hours. But most disturbing of all was her brain, which showed activity patterns suggesting that she was always thinking, always calculating, always planning her next move even when she appeared to be at rest. She was not just a fighter, Cathrall realized with growing horror. She was a survival machine, a creature designed by millions of years of evolution to overcome any obstacle and defeat any enemy. He searched the Dominion's database for information about her world of origin, using the biological markers in her scan to trace her species back to its home planet. And when he finally found a match, his blood ran cold. The planet was a small blue world in an unremarkable system on the edge of known space. A world that had been surveyed by Dominion scouts centuries ago and flagged with a warning that made Cathrall's hearts pound with fear. Death World, the ancient report read. Do not contact. Do not colonize. Native fauna, extremely hostile. Extinction-level environment. Gravity above galactic average. Atmospheric oxygen at dangerous levels. Extreme temperature variations. Predators in all ecosystems. Even plant life has developed defensive mechanisms. The ghost had evolved on a death world. Cathrall understood now. She had been shaped by an environment so hostile that only the strongest and smartest and most adaptable creatures could survive. She was not weak at all. She was the apex predator of a world where everything was trying to kill everything else all the time. Cathrall rushed to prepare his report for the High Council, his claws trembling as he wrote down his conclusions and recommendations. And he knew that what he had discovered would change everything. The Valori Dominion had made a terrible mistake by capturing this creature, by putting her in their arena and teaching her how to fight their warriors and showing her the weaknesses in their defenses. They had thought she was disposable fodder, but she was actually the most dangerous prisoner they had ever held. And if there were more like her out there in the galaxy, then the Dominion might be facing a threat unlike anything they had ever encountered before. The truth about humanity was about to be revealed, and the Valori would learn that some mistakes cannot be undone. High Inquisitor Cathrall's report arrived at the chambers of the Valori, High Council like a bomb exploding in the heart of their government. And the panic that followed spread through the halls of power like fire through a dry forest. The council members read the report with growing horror, their mandibles clicking in distress as they absorbed the implications of what their investigator had discovered about the creature they had been keeping in their arena. A Deathworld species, the Supreme Chancellor whispered, her voice trembling with something she had not felt in centuries of rule. We captured a predator from a Deathworld, and we put it in our Colosseum to fight for entertainment. How many more of them are there? Another council member demanded. Do they have ships? Do they have weapons? Do they know where we are? No one had answers to these questions, and that uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all, because the Valori had built their empire on the foundation of knowing everything about their enemies before engaging them in conflict. But they knew nothing about the humans, nothing except that one of them had been destroying their arena champions for weeks and showing no signs of slowing down. Emergency orders were sent to all border outposts, commanding them to scan for any sign of ships from the unknown Deathworld. And research teams were assembled to learn everything possible about this new potential threat. Meanwhile, far below the towers of power, in the dark cells beneath the Colosseum, Sarah Vance had not been idle during all the weeks of her imprisonment. She had learned the Valori language by listening carefully to every conversation around her, picking up words and grammar and meaning through the same relentless pattern recognition that made humans such effective learners. She had made allies among the other prisoners, beings from a dozen different worlds who had watched her fight and seen her refuse to give up no matter what odds she faced, and who now looked to her not as a fellow condemned but as something like a leader. There was Krax, a four-armed warrior from a conquered world, who had spent 5 years in the arena and lost all hope until he saw the ghost fight. There was Mira, a small telepathic creature whose people had been enslaved by the Dominion and who could sense the emotions and intentions of those around her. There was Gorth, a massive stone-skinned giant who had been captured while defending his family and who had sworn to escape and return to them someday. And there were dozens of others, prisoners from every corner of the galaxy, all of them united by their shared suffering and their shared hope that the ghost might somehow lead them to freedom. Sira had been planning and preparing and waiting for the right moment, and when her 30th victory arrived, she knew that the time had finally come to reveal the truth. The arena was packed that day with the largest crowd in years, because everyone wanted to see the ghost fight. Everyone wanted to witness the impossible creature who had defied all expectations and become the most talked about prisoner in the history of Kethvora. Her opponent was a champion from another Colosseum, a creature bred specifically for arena combat with enhanced strength and speed and aggression. And the crowd expected a legendary battle between two unstoppable forces. The fight was brutal and bloody and lasted nearly 10 minutes, longer than any of her previous matches, but in the end the ghost stood victorious once again, standing over her fallen opponent with the sand stained red around her feet. The crowd roared with excitement, clicking their mandibles and stomping their feet in the traditional Valori celebration. But then something unexpected happened that silenced them all. The ghost raised her hand, and she spoke. She spoke in perfect Valori language, her voice carrying across the arena through the speakers that had been installed to amplify the announcer's commentary. And every word she said struck the crowd like a physical blow. "My name is Commander Sarah Vance of the United Earth Coalition," she said, her voice strong and clear despite the wounds on her body. "You took me as a prisoner when you destroyed my ship and killed my crew. You called me weak and disposable. You threw me into this arena expecting me to die." She paused and let her words sink in. Let the crowd absorb the fact that she could speak their language, that she had been listening and learning all along. "Where I come from," she continued, "we have a saying that your translators probably cannot fully capture, but I will try to explain it. We say that what does not kill us makes us stronger." She raised her fist into the air, showing them the scars and bruises that covered her skin, the marks of 30 battles that she had survived against all odds. "I am human," she declared. "I come from a world that your own surveys classified as a death world, a planet so dangerous that you warned your people never to go there. And I am the product of millions of years of evolution on that world." The crowd was completely silent now, frozen in shock and fear as they listened to the small creature who had been humiliating their champions speak the truth about what she really was. "You have made a very serious mistake," Sira said, her voice dropping to a tone that somehow felt more threatening than any shout could have been. "My people do not abandon each other. My people do not forget when one of their own is taken. And my people have been searching for me since the moment my ship went down." At that exact moment, High Inquisitor Kethrol's communication officers were detecting something on their long-range sensors, something emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. 12 ships at first, then 50, then 200. A fleet of vessels unlike anything the Valori had ever seen, broadcasting a message on all frequencies in dozens of languages. "This is Admiral Chun of the United Earth Coalition," the message said. "We are here for Commander Vance. We know she is alive, and we are not leaving without her. You have 1 hour to respond before we consider alternative methods of retrieval." In the arena, Sira lowered her fist and smiled for the first time since her capture, a smile that showed her small blunt teeth, but somehow conveyed more threat than any set of fangs could have. "They are here," she said simply. "My people have come, and now you will learn what happens when you harm one of us." The Valori Dominion had wanted entertainment, and now they were going to get more than they had ever bargained for. Admiral James Chun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UEC Relentless. and watched through the view screen as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the Valerie world of Kethvara. 200 warships bristling with weapons and ready for whatever came next. For 3 months, they had been searching for Commander Vance, following the trail of her destroyed ship through neutral space and into the territory of an empire that humanity had never encountered before. And now they had finally found her. The distress beacon from the Perseverance had led them here. Faint signals that had been detected by long-range sensors and traced across dozens of light years. Because the United Earth Coalition did not abandon its people, not ever, not for any reason. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "We are receiving transmissions from the surface. It appears Commander Vance is alive, and she has somehow managed to send us tactical information about the enemy defenses." Chung felt a surge of pride and relief at this news, because of course, Sarah had found a way to help with her own rescue. That was exactly the kind of officer she had always been. The tactical data appeared on his screens, and he studied it carefully, noting the positions of defense platforms and the locations of military installations and the weak points in the planetary shield network. "Open a channel to the Valori government," he ordered. "Let us see if we can resolve this without bloodshed, though I want all weapons charged and ready just in case." His message was broadcast on all frequencies, giving the Valori 1 hour to respond. And then he waited with the patience of a commander who knew that every decision he made could affect the lives of millions. On the surface of Kethvara, chaos had erupted in the aftermath of Sarah's revelation. The arena crowd fleeing in panic while the guards struggled to maintain order in the face of this unexpected development. The prisoners had heard her words and seen the ships on the screens that displayed news from across the Dominion. And they knew that something incredible was happening. That the Ghost had somehow called down rescue from the stars. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by guards who did not know whether to capture her or flee from her. And she waited calmly for whatever would happen next. "What do we do with her?" One guard asked another, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "The High Council has ordered her brought to them immediately." Another replied, "They want to use her as a hostage to negotiate with the human fleet." But before they could move to grab her, Sarah spoke again, a voice carrying across the arena with the authority of someone who had already won. "I would not recommend that," she said. "My people have very specific policies about hostage situations, and none of those policies will end well for you." The guards hesitated, looking at each other with fear in their multiple eyes. And in that moment of hesitation, the first human shuttle descended through the atmosphere. It was a sleek military transport, cutting through the sky like a knife through water, and it circled the arena once before landing on the sand in a cloud of dust and displaced air. The doors opened and soldiers poured out. Human soldiers in powered armor with weapons that made the Valori equipment look primitive by comparison, and they formed a protective perimeter around the shuttle. Admiral Chun himself stepped onto the sand, his dress uniform immaculate despite the chaos around him, and he walked across the arena floor toward the woman who had survived 3 months in an alien death pit. "Commander Vance," he said, stopping in front of her and saluting with perfect military precision. "We have been looking for you." Sarah returned the salute, her voice hoarse from weeks of fighting but still steady and strong. "Took you long enough, sir." Chun smiled at that, because it was exactly the response he would have expected from her. And then he turned to look at the prisoners who had gathered around them. Dozens of aliens who had clearly been fighting alongside the Ghost. "What about them?" he asked. Sarah looked at her allies, at Krax and Myra and Gorth, and all the others who had believed in her when they had no reason to hope. And she made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "They come with us," she said. "They helped me survive this place, and I will not leave them behind to be punished for their loyalty." Chun nodded without hesitation, because this too was exactly what he expected from a coalition officer, and he gave orders to his soldiers to escort all of the prisoners to the waiting shuttles. The Valori High Council watched these developments through security cameras and made desperate calculations about their options. But every calculation led to the same conclusion. They could fight the human fleet and probably lose, suffering devastating damage to their military and their infrastructure. Or they could negotiate and hope that the humans were willing to let this incident pass without further violence. Within the hour, a message was sent to Admiral Chun proposing terms of peace, and negotiations began that would reshape the relationship between humanity and the Valori Dominion. The prisoners of Cathvora were freed, every single one of them, and many chose to travel with the humans back to Earth, wanting to see the legendary Death World that had produced the Ghost. The Colosseum was shut down permanently, declared a violation of sentient rights under the new treaty that was signed between the two powers. And Sierra Vance became a legend, not just among the Valori, but across the entire galaxy, as the story of her survival spread from world to world and species to species. They told tales of the soft-skinned alien who had been thrown into the arena as fodder and had emerged as a conqueror, of the human who had refused to die no matter what was thrown at her. They learned a new word that they had never heard before, a word that came from a small blue death world on the edge of known space, and that word was human. And they learned a new rule that they whispered to each other in the dark corners of space stations and trading posts, a rule that would protect humanity for generations to come. Never underestimate them, never capture them, never harm them. Because humans do not forget, and humans do not forgive, and humans always come for their own. Commander Sierra Vance returned to Earth a hero, decorated with every medal the Coalition could offer. But she always said that the greatest honor was simply coming home. And somewhere in the galaxy, in cells and prisons and arenas where the oppressed still suffered, they told stories about the ghost of Cathvora, and they dared to hope that someday, somehow, humanity might come for them too. The end of one story was the beginning of 1,000 others, and the legend of the humans had only just begun.